I'm going to say a good afternoon and good morning to everyone, just whilst we're waiting for everyone to start joining, because I can see a lot of people joining now and a lot of people in the waiting room. So a big hello. My name is Leila McKenzie-Delis, and I'm the founder and CEO of Dial Global. Today, I am joined for this very, very special webinar where we're going to be talking about provocatively, is DEI dead or is it simply evolving? We're going to be talking a lot about a sustainable approach to social impact and how we can look at strategies and transferable methodologies in order for individuals, inspirational leaders, and organizations to really truly stay the course amidst some of the backlash that we are seeing. With this webinar, the idea is that we will inspire you, will educate you, and motivate you with this phenomenal panel that we have here today. As you've probably seen, there's been a lot of political shifts, there's been some polarizing headlines and some elements of corporate retraction. But actually, even though we are seeing some questions and these headlines out there, what's always going to be true is the need for equity, for fairness, for belonging. None of that has gone anywhere. And this is a time where it really, truly matters to step up, to lean in. And I feel personally very, very proud indeed to be hosting a conversation that matters and talking about what's next for the future of work and why it's so critical that we have social impact and inclusion at the heart. Without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Anisa Misagi, who is the Chief Sustainability and Corporate Affairs Officer for Pladis Global. She's a wealth of experience within FMCG and retail, and she also sits on the IDE board at Pladis. We have Vildan Searcy, who is President, General Manager, Global CMO and Transformation Leader, Purpose-Driven Changemaker, recognised as one of the top 50 Turkish women leaders in 2024 by Capital Business Magazine. We have Natalie Amosu, who was the former Chief Marketing Officer for Ann Summers, for Game PLC, for Arcadia. She's done a huge amount within marketing, communications and advisory within the consumer brand space. And last but never least, the phenomenal Bahar Ozturk, the Chief Growth Officer for Twizer, also the founder of a brilliant inclusion awareness network, of which I've just come back from Istanbul to speak at, called Aynan. And more recently, which is very, very exciting, Bahar has just confirmed hosting for Bloomberg in Istanbul a program around believing in change. So truly, this is an absolute powerhouse panel that we have, and again, feel very humbled to be chairing with these phenomenal women. I'm going to come straight across to Anisa first and foremost to kind of really set a scene for us. No pressure, Anisa, but I know you're an absolute pro. Anisa, as Chief Corporate Affairs and Sustainability Officer at Pladis and a dedicated member of the company's IDE board, you're uniquely positioned at this intersection of corporate responsibility, global brand reputation, and long-term social impact. In a climate where IDE is increasingly scrutinised or sometimes deprioritised, how are you helping the organisation stay the course on inclusion and sustainability whilst ensuring that the narrative remains authentic, credible, and commercially aligned?
Thank you, Leila. It's interesting actually. Before we came into the webinar, I was talking to someone in my team about this webinar, and they said, "What is it called?" I said, "Is DEI dead?" They said, "You know, when it's the title, the headline is a question, the answer is always no." So I think that was a great way to start off the webinar today, because that is absolutely my opinion. I don't think it is dead at all. And as Leila, you said, I've been really privileged to lead sustainability, but also the social impact, and had many opportunities to put my fingerprints over the inclusion and diversity piece. The question that you outlined is super interesting about being authentic and credible. And I would go back to how we as a business look at any commercial challenge that we have. And I think the stats speak for themselves. And I was doing some research as I was lamenting over the title of this. And it wasn't long ago that we read about 25% more likely for companies to have higher profits if they have more diverse teams. And talking about actually the environment that we play in. And if you're more likely to have better profits if you've got a more diverse and more ethnically diverse C-suite. So thinking about all of that, I just really do think that the more and more we put business cases forward for IDE and think about the credibility in that sense, the more that we can persevere with these agendas. So shaping it more as a business case rather than stepping on eggshells around regulation is probably a different way of looking at IDE than we have in the past. I think this idea of authenticity is going to be a really interesting one as we go through the coming months and years, and the credibility of leadership. As Leila, you did say, I also lead sustainability, and I think we are going through the same challenges, the same walking on eggshells. But at Pladis, where I am working, we believe that we're a brand. We're full of brands. We're your favourite brands like McVitie's and Godiva and Jacob's Snacks. So with brands, it's a trust mark. So if you don't trust the brands and you don't trust the business, how can you be credible? So they're the questions that we're asking ourselves. But like I say, I think the position that we are with sustainability and IDE, they're interlinked, and I'm really happy and up for the challenge of ensuring that it stays for the long term.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I think you've described it perfectly there is brands trust mark, long-term sustainable credibility is absolutely critical. To a certain extent, the consumer does not discriminate. And with all of wonderful household name brands that Pladis has, actually, it's so much about the consumer, and it's also about, you mentioned the business case, is looking at sustainability, IDE as a commercial lever to drive economic growth and prosperity, and also to really connect with the consumer audience. Absolutely key. So staying the course, despite some of the lumps that we're seeing, is what is right long term, and certainly speaks to the rest of the global markets as well, even though we're obviously seeing, certain things coming from, the States, perhaps a little more so. This weaves me perfectly into moving across to Vildan, Vildan Cersei, who's also worked with a number of household name organizations. Vildan, drawing from some of your experiences at Henkel and Beyond, obviously worked for Unilever and other brand owners in the past. How have you developed your personal brand as a leader, and how has that helped navigate some of the internal challenges of leadership, particularly as a woman in senior roles?
Thank you, Leila. I think it's a great question. Also reflecting back my 20 years of experience in the industry. But when we think about personal brand, we immediately think it's self-promotion, which is actually not true. Because if you think as a marketeer growing up in a CPG industry, we all build brands, and every brand has a very unique selling proposition and a reason to stay within the market. And the same holds for the female leaders as well. And for this, I learned it throughout my career and developed also many other female leaders with this thinking that you need to stand up for something. You should have a purpose. And I think Anissa was very rightly pointing out that the diversity, inclusion, sustainability, those topics that have a long-term impact within the organization, but also in the society, are also most of the time that the female leaders really stand up within their organizations. And I was also one of them. And coming back to the personal branding and building that within organization, I think it's all about aligning the actions, the values, and the words within that, context. Because most of the time, the leaders, the female leaders, also the male leaders in the organizations are looked up for how do they lead and how do they stand behind those values. And I think this consistency in behaviors build this credibility in the organizations. Like you build a brand in the consumer industry, and that brand delivers its promise. The same is true for the leaders. And I had the experience to do that in the last 20 years. And in the meantime, I have like more than 50 mentees across the different organizations I have, been to, and also try to bring that over, that actually just performing and doing good on your job is not sufficient. Own something, own your narrative, and communicate that narrative, make an impact, and just don't expect the people to discover your value and be visible for that. I think that's the biggest message I would like to give to the female leaders who want to grow up in their organizations or globally, because that is so important. And also a group like that, where the female leaders are nurturing each other, building a network, creating a kind of a strong equity, is extremely important in building that further and growing it.
Thanks so much, Vildan. And I love that you've touched on the point of personal branding, because if you look back kind of 10 years ago and some, and obviously we've got some amazing communications, marketing, brand leaders here, is it was almost perceived as something that was a little bit icky, personal branding. Actually, it's something that is core now for the authenticity of leadership, especially within corporate organizations, because that is where shareholders, employees, different stakeholders are looking. They're looking at our senior leaders thinking, is there an emulation of myself there? Can I see myself in a position like that? Which is why it's so wonderful to have you all here today. And moving on from that, how can we evolve this conversation to move? Forgive me, I have a little bit of baby brain at the moment, so I'm asking you silly things here, Vildan. I'm probably oversharing with everyone, but I am 6 weeks away from giving birth, and I was thinking I'm
Oh,
asking the wrong thing here. So following on from what you've said around authentic leadership, Vildan, what role do you say authentic leadership plays in maintaining some of the brand integrity that both you
mhm.
and Anissa have talked about? And what investments do we still need to put in to support and advance female leadership within organizations?
Well, I think, Leila, you've been a fantastic example of an authentic leadership. Just looking at yourself. And I think it's about really being in the moment, being authentic yourself, and being vulnerable, because that creates connection within the organizations and that creates fellowship. If I think about 5 to 10 years back then, where I was seeing myself in a highly male dominated environment, trying to give my voice, where my voice might be heard and needs to be echoed by other male leaders so that it can put into force. When I think about now, actually it has completely changing, because I think what we are really bringing is the authentic leadership is putting our personal self and just being vulnerable, so that it creates more relation, creates more connection with the people that we are leading, and it creates trust and a fellowship. So I think first thing is to really have that psychological safety, and it starts in the higher management level. And in the organizations, as much as we grant that psychological safety, being aware of the unconscious bias that might be happening, I think that topic is very big, that what could lead a female leader or a leader of a minority could be, hold back in certain situations that already creates the problem. And within the organizations, there are many programs around that, but it's almost like a marketing campaign. You first need to create an awareness. If people are not aware of it, you can never create a consideration and a behavior and an organizational cultural change at the end. So the way how we are overcoming, or how I'm trying to overcome, is just to be myself and be the role model for the environment I'm in, and try to create a fellowship around that, and creating a psychological safety for the people, for my people, and for the organization to be the best version of themselves. It's easy to say, but it's very hard to execute, because there are, of course, a lot of barriers, as I mentioned, but it's important to create that awareness, and being vocal about that is also important, just to reflect when there are situations when it's not simply right. And it's important. And you might be judged for being assertive, where your male partners or your male peers were actually being put in a position where they are coming from a point of strength. But at the end of the day, with the authenticity and the vulnerabilities, you were just showing in a very authentic way. When it comes out, actually, it creates your own point of difference in that environment. And I'm a strong believer in that one. And I've seen that throughout my career. It never became a derailleur, but it became more of an accelerator, because we can only do the best things that we can be doing by being the real person that we want to, portray in our everyday life.
I love the way that you talk about the role models, and what we often say here is it's the real models. I saw as well a couple of rolled eyes when we're talking about, male counterparts. We love our male allies, but equally, there is that pressure sometimes to really mirror and reflect back our surroundings in certain cultures. And so the authenticity, the psychological safety, that vulnerability, actually, it becomes a bit of a trickle effect when you see it in leadership, and it starts to then emulate down and really feed into the culture. And a wonderful example is, obviously all of you here, but even, with Anissa, Anissa, I know that you've been, the first, like you're the first only female of color who is at the level that you are, and also to call it out here, also the age that you are. We've got a really, pretty youthful panel here, which I think is incredible. And there's all those different layers of intersectionality that also come to the fore when we are in a certain work environment. But certainly it's, you're one of the reasons why I was like, oh my goodness, yes, 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 to joining the IDE board at Pladis, because you think, wow, Anissa's there, Vildan's there, Bahar's there, Natalie's there, literally, kids in a board meeting, ship them off, off we go, and it's those stories that you really remember. And I remember, those stories that you've told me, and I just think, it really helps and supports others because they don't know what it's like when you get up to those more senior levels. Coming across to Natalie from one perspective on brands to another. Natalie, obviously, you have held leadership roles at some super interesting brand owners, Anne Summers and also Game. Very distinct audiences, very different reputational considerations. Tell us a little bit more about how you adapted some of your personal leadership strategies within those kind of environments, following on from some of the things that Vildana said.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, and thanks, Leila, for inviting me here today. I think really just now I totally resonated with the comments around authenticity, because actually that's one thing that I've learned throughout my career, and I've worked for a lot of the high street fashion, predominantly consumer brands, is you can't fake authenticity, because consumers and your teams now will call it out. And actually, if it's called out, you then suddenly go from a position of having to earn trust or regain trust to generate loyalty with your customers. I mean, Ann Summers and Game they're very different brands, you're right, but they're also very similar in the sense of they are specialist brands, and they have an incredibly passionate customer base. But they were both legacy brands, so they had lots of history, which is fantastic. But also, I was given on both occasions the challenge of and the exciting opportunity of dusting down those brands and repositioning them in today's market to make them completely relevant and viable. When I went into Ann Summers, Jacqueline Gold was very open with me and said, can you help us? There's 87% brand awareness for Ann Summers, but actually it was a brand that was completely bold, really unapologetic. There was a legacy rooted in female empowerment and female business leaders. And it was an honour, but actually the brand also came with lots of cultural baggage, lots of preconceived ideas. And for those of you that know Ann Summers, you will know you will instantly have a story or a memory or a question around the brand. And if you don't, it's a UK creative brand that is steeped in female sexual empowerment and wellness. So when going in there for me, it was more around modernizing the message and leading from a place of values first storytelling. So actually engaging and making sure that DE&I wasn't just it's not just a buzzword. It was about restoring our credibility and our relevance in a world where lots of the other bigger retailers with deeper pockets could dig deeper and potentially move faster. But as a specialist, it was making sure that you stayed true to your legacy, but evolved your practices from hiring through to how you spoke to the customer, and just making sure that we always engaged with marginalized voices. So the customer pretty much always knew that we saw them. That was a main strapline for the brand. It was, we see you. And I think in our behaviors, it was demonstrating quite clearly, we hear you. But also the challenge there is making sure that you stay true to your brand. So you don't try to be all things to all people, because you will very quickly fall over as a specialist. The gender identity, inclusive representation, making sure that actually for Ann Summers specifically, if you looked at the brand, it was always making sure that you either saw somebody that you aspired to be. That's a unfortunately, as much as you want to get away from it, that's a female trait, that you would always want to be somebody else or imagine that life would be better if, but also make sure that we were relatable. So you would look at any of the talent or the messages we were putting out and think, I get that, they see me. But also just to generate inquisitivity. Sorry, I'm not saying that right, am I? But I think it's a space around making sure that through normalization, you make people feel confident and comfortable enough to ask questions. And if you don't know the answer, just be, again, going back to the original point, just as authentic as you possibly can be. I think with Game, the challenge was slightly different. They were way more digitally native as a consumer base, but also as passionate. And if I'm honest with you, much happier to be a keyboard warrior if you got it wrong. Whereas with Ann Summers, their relationship was very intimate. They would talk to you directly and they would complain directly because it was a personal relationship. With Game, they particularly at Game, if you were a gamer, you almost loved Game because that's where you could go and they were a specialist, but you hated them because what did they know about your game, and what did they really know about gaming, and did they really level up at the same level that you did, and did they really understand your world, or were they just there to make money from the industry? And I think it was initially, for me, at first, it was very much making sure that I got the trust of the team, because here was this marketeer that came in from fashion. So specifically, what did she know? And I think the general belief was that I'd come from fashion, so therefore I must know all about big budgets. And actually, everybody in fashion was very much, oh, you're in Game. Oh, what's it like to have those big budgets? So it's the same challenge, just a different customer end purchase that you were dealing with. And at Game, I guess I worked internally to really diversify representation, specifically to make sure that people understood it was that, women in gaming was very much a thing. There were female gamers as much as there were male gamers, and actually gaming comes from a place of passion. You needed to reflect the growing diversity of the audience, but make sure that you had the trust of the customer, because if you tried to make out you could be all things to all people in the world of gaming, you would absolutely have been shot down. And it was a painful place to start from. I definitely came in and had a very new approach to social media at Game. And we killed ourselves on the first hurdle. We were too vocal about a particular game launch, and the gamers came down on us like a ton of bricks. But internally, they were down on us as well. Suddenly, there was a real loss of trust. And I think the biggest thing that I could do is just hold my hand up and say, you know what, we got it wrong. And we didn't get it wrong deliberately to make you feel this anger. We got it wrong by trying to do right. So let's just move forward together. And I think if you can be honest and show your vulnerabilities, as has been mentioned by the brilliant people that have spoken before me, then I think that is a way of being able to move forward. We're not going to get it right all the time, but we can try to do it a step at a time.
That is such an interesting point, and I'd love it if anyone actually wanted to chip in here at all, because I do believe, and what I've seen externally is the communication and marketing style has evolved significantly over the last decade. Anyone can be a a warrior, as mentioned. Anyone can take to social media and give their opinions, but actually, how can we as leaders and brands really show up in a way that says, hey, do you know what, we're never going to get it right all the time, because leaders, brands, organizations, all made up of humans, we are fallible. And so actually some of the biggest pieces of credibility come when we're saying, hey, we've got it wrong, but actually we're going to put it right now, because you simply also can't keep everyone happy. And this, digital AI, another huge hot topic. It's just all happening so quickly.
Mhm.
Anissa, I might come to you just to ask your
Yeah,
thoughts on this, if you don't
yeah, of
mind.
course. Yeah, of course. I was actually just reflecting on it because it is such a profound point. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting how brands sometimes are used for commercial activities actually, and we've got a great example which I'm super proud of, and I've mentioned this to Leila many times, but it was our partnership with Mind, the mental health charity, and that came about purely because it was a really a horrible story, but one that gave us so much hope. So I'll share it with you. We at Pladis, we have a number of factories, and we had an unfortunate suicide in one of our factories, and that led to huge kind of shock with our colleagues there, because they never knew that this individual had depression, and that team decided to come to the exec team within the UK and say, look, this is a problem. This is a huge problem, and we were so naive to think that we knew this person, but we didn't, and they took their own lives. So that actually became and inspired one of the exec members on the UK executive, who said, I've had lived experience with mental ill health, and I'm going to share my story and start working on how really we can move the dial at Pladis. So that one executive decided to be an ally to that group, and they founded an internal group, like an ERG, called Positive Minds, and it was all about mental ill health. But they decided to use the language in a very interesting way to make it into something that is joyful and engaging. How do you become mentally fit as individuals, and especially in the workplace? That one idea then caught the attention of our marketeers, and they were like, well, actually we bake biscuits. Our purpose is happiness. So biscuits are almost a facilitator of conversation, and we know that mental ill health happens when we're lonely, and could we actually put the biscuit as this facilitator of speaking and talking about how we're feeling? So that led to the partnership with Mind, and they were incredible partners with us. But it became a commercial proposition as well. We had Be Kind and Let's Talk all over our packaging. We came into some of the supermarkets and we said, actually, let's think about how we can work together. Again, they completely jumped at the opportunity to work with us, all to tackle this social issue. And again, that campaign started in 2017, and it still lives with us today. So it's been a number of years where we continue to look at a social impact project as a marketing proposition. But the most important thing with that was that it stemmed from an internal colleague challenge. So it made it completely authentic. And that's one thing which I would say is one of the proudest moments of working at Pladis, is ensuring that this was embedded throughout our kind of value chain, internally and externally.
Love that.
I think we're all going to remember biscuits as a facilitator now, aren't we? And so it's those moments that matter though, isn't it? Does anyone have any other comments actually or thoughts around this? Because those moments of employee engagement I think are wonderful, and also in those times where we don't quite realize actually what's going on below the surface, some of the most profound things can happen.
Mhm.
Vilda, may I come to you before I then come back across to the
Yeah,
fabulous Mar?
I was actually reflecting what Anissa said, and actually now I'm connecting the dots with the brands, but as also in the corporate purpose. I mean, Henkel, the company that I worked for more than 19 years, we have the purpose of pioneering at heart for the good of generations, which means whatever we do with our products has a bigger purpose to have a bigger impact on the society. And that comes back to the two areas that I think Anissa was mentioning. One is sustainability, does not have an impact immediately, your environmental and social impact and your impact on societies. And the other one is basically in the area of DIY, right? I mean, that you can have an impact for the generations to have equality. And putting that on a higher level than a product or a brand that you have brings so much more connection and also a continuity on the marketplace that actually creates more of a reason to be there. You know, if that brand is going to disappear from one day to another, what do people really lose? Are they going to lose their favorite biscuit? Are they going to lose their favorite chocolate or the shampoo that they were using in my case? Or are they going to lose something that a brand that has really authentically putting an impact on the society and in the lives of the people? And I think that's super important. Maybe an example of a brand that I was responsible for got to be hairstyling brand. You might know it in UK as well. It's huge, also in the US. And that brand has the purpose of to entice people to be who they want to be, who they want to be, which means that if you're coloring your hair blue, or if you're basically a non-binary person and want to show up your hairstyle with crazy wigs and so on, you might be judged by the society and you might be under the critics of judgment in the social media, so that people are really not helping you or basically encouraging you to become the best version of yourself. And with that brand, we kind of took us as a territory of cyberbullying. Anti-cyberbullying as a territory. The moment when that brand, when you want to express yourself the way you want with your color of hair, with your style of your hair, when you're under that, actually the brand stands behind and says that we are actually helping you, we are educating that, and we are blocking that cyberbullying and working with the NGOs, creating an impact. So this is also a bit similar to the example of Vanessa. A brand which you style your hair, a biscuit that you're eating becomes something larger than that by creating a social impact and a movement in the society with a very solid purpose. And this is, I think, what people, what the consumers, and what the markets need. And I think we can do it either with our brands, but also with our own personal brand, that what we want to stand for. And I think we are all here today as we are standing up for DIY. You brought us together, Leila. So I think that's kind of the thinking I was having when my co-panelists were building their ideas and bringing some inspiring, content. Thank you, Anissa. That's really triggered a lot of my thinking.
Oh, I absolutely love this. The energy is brilliant, and it's wonderful to see and hear all of the evidence that shows that sustainability, social impact, diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, all of these things influence not only consumer purchasing behavior, but also influence the employees that we serve as leaders. Let's come across to the fabulous Bahar. And I have to say, Bahar is literally the hostess with the mostess. So I am trying to do as great a job as she did last week in Istanbul. And with the new TV show with Bloomberg, all very, very exciting indeed. So Bahar, I hope I'm doing you proud as well. I've heard you speak about personal motivations behind some of your work in the business world. You've been a convener of many, where, sometimes, in particular at the conference last week, we were talking about how there is sometimes deprioritization. And ultimately, we as leaders have that responsibility to make sure that this remains essential, particularly in the context of social impact and sustainability. Talk to us a little bit more about that and some of the deeper purpose behind these initiatives.
Hey, Leila, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, the part of this conversation. And after the last week, the impression that we shared at the INA Summit, I'm really feel proud that I spent the time with you and the the women here. Actually, I took lots of notes. I don't know the audience, but I have like 2 or 3 pages with my notes. Thank you so much for all sharing this. And I want to start with the why DEI actually is not dying, it's evolving instead. You all mentioned about this, of course, but I also mentioned about the talent shortage, let's say. Because we all say that DEI is not nice to have, it's something that must have, must actually. And it is a strategic, economic, and moral imperative, especially in today's world, actually. And you all, I think, follow the World Economic Forum. This is 6 of the top 10 feature skills directly related to empathy, inclusion, and human connection. And by 2030, actually, the talent shortage could cost the global economy $8.5 trillion. So actually, we simply cannot afford to ignore the potential of the talent. And the talent means is everybody, I think, right now. It's not only a group of the people as we used to have. So that's why the young is not dying. The first thing that I want to share, actually. And before to move on the other topic, like the diversity and why we are talking about this, I also want to share my story about Inan and also the Inan story. It's all because it started with me. And it's a kind of the ripple effect. I always call it like this because in our story, just starting with the one drop that I did actually, and then now with the 100 of the people are working for this with the same purpose. That's why I really want to share with you this story. First of all, I spent like my career, especially like around 13 years in the direct selling industry. And maybe you know that in the direct selling, you don't need to graduate at university. You don't need to be in that age. You don't need to be someone. You just want to work. And so many people, they normally cannot have a chance to work in a global company or getting lots of income or doing something else. They actually, when they have that opportunity, they get an income. They affect the society around them, their family, their friends, and they also get the confidence. And these actually help me to understand actually if you share the let's say the access with everyone, you can share the success, you can share the opportunities. So what I want to share about this, it is started with the direct selling actually for me because I always think that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And direct selling showed me that one actually. And then my career actually, it was a good one. When I was 27, I was the country manager for 5 countries, and it was a great moment to share. And when someone asked me about my career, I always share this story, of course, not something else, but always there's also something else. And I actually admire my manager, but I also get the mobbing from him. And when I was so young and had that responsibility, it was not easily I couldn't easily overcome that, let's say, the challenge that I face. I was lucky because I have great mentors and I get the good support. And then after 2 years, I had another supervisor. And then I realized that I'm okay, I'm doing well. So it was not about somebody else. The success is all about me and I can continue in a way. So it didn't actually affect my career. But after a while, I just see a girl just started our company and she has a great potential, a brilliant, you see from her eyes. But because of her manager, she had the same challenge that I had, and I tried to help her. I tried to mentor her. I tried to also mentor the manager that she worked with, but actually I couldn't achieve. And then the system actually pushed her out. That moment, I said to myself, I said to myself earlier, I will not allow anyone else just do the same thing to me, the mobbing things to me again. But at that moment, I realized that I don't want to let anyone happen, you know. So that's why I just thought that I need to do something. And then I just came across a newsletter in LinkedIn and I saw that women, they're already working in somewhere, share their challenges. They didn't think that, I think it's became a label or, you know, it just affects their career or something. They just share it. And it encouraged me. And I said to myself, if you want to do something, first be honest, be authentic. and then share your own story. And then I did. They invited me a podcast. It wasn't easy, by the way. Writing is easy, but not, speaking at the same time. And then I just thought what I should do. And I realized that if I create a platform that everyone can share their story and people just encourage between each other, it will affect, because, if we just define the problem, if we share the problem, then we find a way to solve this. Otherwise, we just talk, and we cannot do anything. That's why I started a program. It's called Speak Up on YouTube channel. It's Harvard Business Review that we host together. And because of this, just people started to share their stories. And then we became a group of the people who want to do something for this, who want to change this, or maybe believe in change. Because Inan means believe, by the way. It is a shortcut of Inclusion Awareness Network, but it also in Turkish means believe. And I think also the name encouraged people to do something. So believe in change. And then Inan became a platform, a group, a community, and also now is an NGO. So I want to share my story first, Leila. I hope that it makes sense. But I think it is good to decide to do something. And if you do that, you see that lots of people just want to contribute and change something.
Believe in change is so powerful, and I particularly love the fact that you've talked about the cultural dynamics here, because actually we haven't really recognised that we have brilliant leaders all in different countries. So, well, two of you actually are Turkish. Of course, but Vildan over in New York, Istanbul, also the UK, and this wonderful smorgasbord of different cultures, I think, brings a super interesting dynamic to any conversation. I have another little question to ask Bahar, but I will just say I'm not ignoring everyone who is sending in lovely questions and lots of emojis. I see hearts and claps, so keep them coming. Loving the positivity. Thank you for all of the comments. Lots of lovely comments about each of our panelists. And some people saying, John said you've got a great example from Canada on a retail brand. The lovely Paul from Jaguar Land Rover is saying role models should be authentic leaders regardless of gender. Kate on our team is reminding everyone that actually we've got a little bit of time, although it's running short, on questions which we can pose to our fantastic panelists as well. And some comments around how, is there a need to reposition some of the EDI language and social impact given, what is happening at the moment. And Aruj, little shout out actually saying that he's loving how I'm chairing this panel. So thank you, Aruj, specifically. And really interesting your comments around some of the personal brand side of things. So Bahar, another question for you before I ask you all a question actually around some of the pivotal moments in your career. But Bahar, what do you think we can learn from some of these experiences about staying culturally relevant? Because actually, culture is all around us. We've got lots of different cultures here. How do we stay resilient in today's climate?
Yeah. I think first of all, we should aware of our unconscious bias. I think we all talk about this, but it's so important. If we understand what's going on in our brain, and then we also find a way to change it, or sometimes we need empathy to understand. Because if we think that we want to help, we need to help somebody else, it is not for us. We never think that we need this right in some day. So then it is not, I think, right thing to do. So I always believe in that we should start with the unconscious bias, and we should start with empathy. And awareness is also think that it is not something, let's say, the powerful, but it's all started with awareness. And I think when we are talking about, for example, the DEI, people always think about the gender and the women. But it's not always the gender. There are lots of things that we need to consider, like socioeconomical station, like the ethnicity, especially in Turkey. When you say that culture, maybe when we are talking about the US, we are talking about something else when we say the diversity, or it comes to our mind. When we are talking about diversity in Turkey, we all think about the gender, but there are also other things that we have to consider. Then we can have the empathy, and we think that it may also affect us. Because For example, in Turkey, I think in everywhere, if you want to work somewhere, you have to graduate with, specific university or specific departments. But if you are not part of this, even you are still, going to school, you understand that you cannot work in that company in your life. And it's not a thing that we want to achieve, especially in Inan. We believe that everyone deserves a chance to be successful. So we have to change something. And I also I was surprised when I heard that we have made like 35,000 decisions a day, 35,000, and 90% is autopilot mode. Think about it. For 90%, you don't need to think. If you are just thinking about which glass that you need, it is maybe not important. But if you also make a decision on autopilot mode for hiring somebody else, then it's a big problem. And so 90% is a big number. And, our brain is always creating this story based on our, the social norms and the unconscious bias. So we cannot fight with it, but we can think twice. And if we think twice, then we have a chance to change something. So I think first we have to understand what is diversity, what we are talking about. It's not only the gender, it's not only the, ethnicity. We're thinking about so many things at the same time. Sometimes introvert, extrovert. You see that so many, the higher level position. If you want to be in that position, you should be extrovert. If you're introvert, you are, I think less chance. So there are lots of things that we have to consider. And I think we should always think twice. Leila. So.
Bahar, thank you so much. I'm going to pose a question to all of our panelists, and it's a really nice one because it's touched on many of the themes for today. I'm seeing a load of questions coming in. Thank you to my team at Dial who are sending lots of questions in one big piece for me. So I'll try and get through as many as I can. But very quickly, I would like to ask everyone, and just, a couple of minute answer is perfect because we are a little short on time. But I wonder, what were the pivotal moments in your career personally that shaped your leadership journey? And how did you ensure that you were seen, heard, and valued, especially, and not exclusively, but especially in the light of the unique challenges women often face in the workplace? And for those who have put some really lovely comments about this is what we need to hear more of this for the youth of the future, I think that's going to touch on, hopefully, answering some of those questions, because it's easy to look up the corporate ladder or look up into organizations and say, hey, wow, C-suite, CMO, CEO, founder, etc., actually is not always easy. So pivotal moments and any challenges or career defining moments for you. And I am going to go Anissa, Natalie, Vildan, and back to Bahar. And the last couple of questions, if that's okay. Anissa.
Sure. Oh gosh, it's such a tricky question. But I probably just maybe two examples for today. I've been in a C-suite position for the last 6 years or so, and I have 2 children who are 2 and 4, which means that half of my time has been either pregnant or I took quite a short maternity leave on both. So actually having children, being pregnant and having children, managing maternity leave with a predominantly male executive committee has definitely been challenging, but also an opportunity to really stand for something. And I hope that I have been able to persevere in my role, but also be a role model for other people in the business that are going through the same life transition moments, which are absolutely not easy for either parent. But I think this unique position that I'm in, as Leila mentioned before, where I am the youngest person on that executive, a woman, and also I'm Persian. So it does bring a different dynamic to it, but it's been wonderful at Pladis, actually. I've had such great support, all the things that you would think of, which would, regardless of what level you are in an organization, you have the same challenges, you have dual careers, between you and your partner. You have childcare challenges. You see the expense of childcare in the UK, especially. So those having that in the kind of safety of an organization that, again, as we were talking about before, lives its purpose, I think is truly remarkable. So I would say that was my first one. And very quickly, the second one is the IDE board that Leila mentioned. So definitely a pivotal point in my career, and I'm so proud of it. Having the confidence to think of this idea of, actually, let's get some external thinking when it comes to inclusion and diversity, and bring it into Pladis to hold our feet to the fire when it comes to some of these initiatives that we want to build, and founding it, convincing the board that it was the internal board that was the right thing to do, and asking the CEO to put his time and also resources against it. 5 years on, it's still very much thriving, with Leila on our board as well. So they're probably the two ones that I'd like to share with the group now.
Shall I
Thank you
go
so
next,
much,
Leila?
Anissa. Natalie, you
So
don't need me, actually. Feel free to just go straight after one another. We're not doing a good job on timing here, and there's loads of questions. So thank you, Anissa. Natalie.
So I think we can all, there's probably not enough time, you're right, Leila, to kind of talk through all of our pivotal moments. I definitely would love to spend more time. But I think really for me, the pivotal moment was learning that my first career step was into a PR and brand comms role, and actually being able to lean into my communication style. And my personal style is around building a circle, not a ladder, and very much making sure that you are as inclusive as possible, you possibly can be, with your teams and your peers and your seniors, and just invest in relationships, because actually in every business I've worked in, I've been able to go in, particularly in my last two roles, and spend time with everybody and making that point across everyone across my team, making sure that they had 30, 40 minutes where I actually learned about them, heard their questions, and most of that time was really, really valuable, because they would then signpost you to the next person that they wanted, that they felt was valuable, that was their go-to. And truly understanding the full team and the full landscape of a business, it is really valuable. I think there's also mentorship, and not being afraid to ask for, not just offering or making yourself available to anybody who wanted your mentor time, but also for me, my kind of deal breaker is, I will mentor you, but actually, can you reverse mentor? Can I actually learn from you as much as you're learning from me, and kind of having my experience? And then another pivotal moment is just realizing that if you have emotional intelligence and cultural fluency, you can read a room. And if you can read a room and use your leadership position to engage in others that might not necessarily have the confidence to speak up in that moment, but help them to understand that you are supporting them, because we all have the same, if we're all in the same room having the same conversation, then ultimately we all have the same goal. Because in reality, so much of leadership today, and effective leadership, is about courage. It's not just about competence. And I think that's and communication. Like, all of my roads always lead down to efficient communication. You can't always be successful. You have to be able to fail forward, to be able to move forward in any business. And I think that's one of the things that I try to model myself and my own profile on, but also to be able to pass on.
Fabulous. Well done.
Yes, I can go next. I was actually thinking when my co-panelists were sharing really authentically about their own stories, and thinking about I think the last 20 years of my life, where I was in the last 8 years in the top 100 of Henkel, which means that's leading 53,000 employees worldwide. I've been in this pivotal moments, I think, in every 2 to 3 years. I was always felt like, I'm stepping into something unknown. And I don't know, I didn't know. And I even take a step back sometimes. Can I really do that? This feeling of, am I ready for that role? Or actually, I need to push the extra mile to get in there. And then at that point in time, I was literally thinking, if in this position would be another colleague of mine, particularly a male peer, doesn't matter, but probably he's going to be there and say that even he's just meeting 90% of the requirements, would jump into that. Even if I'm doing 120, I would take a step back and think, is that really what I want? But I kind of started to break that unconscious bias in my own head. I think after the last 8 years has been exponential growth within my career, the moment when I realized that actually I am sabotaging myself. And to overcome that one was, I think, Natalie and Anissa, you mentioned about that, and Bahar, you as well, having mentors and sponsors within the organization, that somebody who has been there before could give you a different perspective and also openly talking about, hey, I've been there. It was not easy. I was also not feeling 100% confident about that. But everybody steps into something unknown. And that's the way how you can navigate. And just to conclude on that one, 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I was asked to take over the US organization in the middle of COVID because there was a leadership change. And I was a female leader with a 9-year-old boy and a husband who has a job in Germany. We were living in Germany at that point in time. I moved the family in the middle of COVID in February, in the middle of school year, to US, where my husband was working remotely, where actually my son just adjusted to the new school, and I came in. You know what I realized? Our expatriate policies were just done for sending executive male leaders to a different country because they assume that their wives gonna just follow them and they might maybe not need a childcare. So there was incredible pivot moment, and I'm so grateful that my company took that seriously, and they have to even change some of their expatriate policies in the future to make it more diversity and inclusion. It doesn't matter. You can also be a single parent, could be female or male, but it's important to acknowledge if you want to give an opportunity to somebody who could perform the job, you need to make sure that the person has the equal, opportunities to be able to perform that. So there was been a pivotal moment for me to change a continent, to take over a more challenging role in the middle of COVID and adjusting the family there. But I want to say that at the end, if you believe in yourself and if you think that the first step is the hardest, but once you take the first step, then you kind of crawl, then you run, and it just comes over. Important is just to assume that whatever happens, you're just going to learn out of that.
Oh my goodness, life moments is such a critical piece that's coming up throughout all of the stories. I'm headed into another life moment. We've talked a lot about children, which I think is wonderful because it is a huge change in life with the family. And it's also really hard, I think, especially, for women, not again exclusively women, but going through those life moments with the career, with the family, everything like that. It's not an easy thing, but actually it teaches you huge levels of resilience and being able to pivot. But yes, I'm about to have my second. So I'm listening to you all literally leaning in, going, oh my goodness, this is just absolute gold dust. Bahar, I'm going to come to you and then we'll go for a couple of questions. We are at time. So I'm going to recognize the fact that we've had people step out of board meetings and meetings to join today, but I will carry on if that's okay for about 5 minutes and answer a couple of questions. So Bahar, to you, final thoughts.
I just want to say one sentence, no worries about the time. What I learned actually in my career, I think it's very important. Supporting each other lifts you as well. So when you learn this, I think looking at the business life and everything, the sisterhood is totally changed and it's so powerful. It's all Leila.
Incredible. Thanks so much. If it is okay, and again, panelists, if you do need to drop, I know Anissa, you did step out for board meetings, so thank you, thank you, thank you. If you need to drop, let me know. I'm going to just mention a couple of the questions that we have, and any of our panelists, please do just pop your hand up or lean in. Ray Dempsey, who is fabulous, I should say, former Chief Diversity Officer of Barclays. I'm seeing many names that I know here. Has said, I love the intersections being highlighted here between EDI with people and talent, brand sustainability, social impact. Given the current war, quote unquote, on EDI and the importance it can still play across these areas, how should a corporation structure its efforts? A big question, of course. Where should EDI sit within a corporate structure for greatest impact? That is an amazing question. Thanks, Ray. Any takers?
I can say a few words to kick off. and then maybe pass over to Vidan. I think maybe she'll have more to add. I do think we've gone through this evolution of IDE sitting at the board level or CEO level. My take on it is I do think when IDE is more grassroots led, it does have more of an impact. So where it may have sat at CEO level, potentially maybe it could be edged towards business as usual in the sense of it's led by the people, it's driven by the people that really, really make a difference. So I'll just put that on the table as a bit of a thought starter on that one.
Mm-hmm. Actually, my response is similar to Anisa's. I mean, actually, maybe at the beginning, it's very important if the organization is from scratch establishing that you need a top management support and the board support for visibility as well as for awareness. However, I have seen the most successful, DIY movements within the organization comes from the employer, ESG groups, the groups that also from the employees that are building together and driving certain impact because they are then you have a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. Of course, it needs to be supported from the top as either part of the, chief HRO office, but it needs to a lot of activations that is done actually and ideally in the ERGs within the companies. And the organizations needs to support, fund, and sponsor these ERGs so that the employees could create those groups and make an impact.
That's really interesting. It's essentially what I'm hearing is it's a top down, but it's also a bottoms up initiative. We have some very valuable and large, often, especially given you both mentioned employee resource groups, they're often called business resource groups or voluntary networks even. But these are very powerful groups within organizations and often have huge swathes of individuals in them as well. So employee resource groups, voice of the individuals, some of the grassroots initiatives, but I'm hearing also we've got to have executive sponsorship in order for them to really get the power that they need and they deserve. In the same way that Anise went to the CEO and said, hey, do you know what? Actually, there's influence from Anisa saying, hey, CEO, this is really important. And then you see this trickle effect coming down. Natalie, any thoughts on that before I take one more question?
No, I completely agree that the way to be effective is actually to have the groups that are coming from the actual people in your business, but to have an exec sponsor, because I think that's how you drive empowerment and then also boost the energy and the focus. I think I totally agree. You have to have a sponsor, but it is about it is the bottom up, but I think it's also making them realize that they have the power as a team, as a culturally internally, that it is fully supported and empowered.
So great answer, and I think it's a pertinent one because just from recognizing even some of the names, you've got a range of different individuals who are tuning in today, and that's everyone from marketing, diversity, people, talent functions, right the way through to sustainability and even finance and manufacturing. And so it's how can all get involved, whether it be through employee resource groups and voluntary groups, voice of the people, but then equally, as we've spoken about, and I hope this helps answer the question, is the different functions have their role to play, whether it be an executive, sponsor, investment type of piece. But actually, we've heard already how important EDI and social sustainability is to marketing, communications, and ultimately then driving the revenue in from the consumer base. So a weave and a golden thread, as I often like to think of it, weaving across the different functional areas of the business. One last question, which I'm going to say thanks, Aruj. You've been really vocal and has asked around personal brand here as well. It's a really interesting one. Thank you for all the comments as well around how it's inspiring to see people speak openly and leaders speak openly. But brand, so you've asked, how does one create a personal brand that is inspired by the brand but also maintains individuality of the person in question? That's a really interesting question. So, how does one create a personal brand that's inspired by the brand? And I'm guessing you mean then the brand within the organization, because personal branding within organizational branding, I think that's right, Aru. So hopefully I've got that right. Any thoughts around that?
We can start with that one because I think I touched on that topic at the beginning of our conversation. When creating your personal brand, it's nothing different than yourself. It's not about creating something artificially. I mean, just asking the question when we create a brand or when we are revitalizing the brands in our, portfolio, we always think, what does that brand wants to be known for? And asking that question to yourself, what do you want to be known for? It really starts with your purpose of your reason for being. What gives you more energy? What is your passion? Where are your strengths? Because you can only build your own personal brand based on your strengths. So that's basically DNA. If you're passionate in certain areas, then creating an impact in that area and creating that narrative on a consistent basis and making it visible like a brand, making an advertisement or like a campaign, putting yourself out there, but it's not a self promotion. It's really credibly driving that own impact within the environment that you would like to have a credibility or would like to have, visibility is the way that it is. But it's not about copying, I want to be like that. No, it's basically building on your own DNA, building on your own strengths, own personalities and values. You can build your own brand. And that can evolve because, like a brand that's been there for 30 years, you need to reposition that brand. You need to make that brand relevant. So that's why keeping on learning and growing and extending the network that you have helps you to also reinvent your personal brand over and over again to stay relevant in the marketplace, to stay relevant in the society that you are, or in an organization that you would like to grow up your career. I hope it's helpful. It was just an analogy to think about how you can grow the brands. You have to grow yourself as well, thinking about awareness, consideration, but at the same time, what do I want to be famous for? What is the one thing that people remember about me, when they hear my name?
Mm.
I love these emojis. I can literally, that's the great thing about about digital these days is everyone's just being super positive, and I think that's clearly very, very helpful. I love the dovetail in this conversation that we've had today around personal brand, social brand, organization brand, international influence. Any final thoughts before I wrap up and summarize and thank everyone very, very much indeed? No. Right. Well, the hardest job. How do I summarize everything that has happened within this webinar? I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I can see that we've still got a whole number of individuals who are still here. So I think that is testament to the brilliant voices and the wonderful leaders that we've had on this panel. We've touched on personal stories, we've touched on empowerment, we've touched on the evolution of inclusion, belonging, diversity, equity, culture, social sustainability, internationalism, globalization. It's really been a fantastic business lesson in into itself, and almost felt a real coaching session actually. I'm not sure about everyone else, but I feel very empowered, full of enthusiasm to get back to the day job, and think it's important that we have these moments that really matter. We're often always busy with home, with work, these kind of things, but taking a moment to stop, listen, be inspired, I think is critical. And that's something that will be more and more critical as we get, deeper into work, as we become more senior in our roles. But inclusivity is such a powerful social and economic impact as well. Inclusive organizations, inclusive leaders are more innovative. Proof is right here in front of you. More innovative, more engaging. There's more opportunities and employee retention as well. We know that the facts and figures are there, that these leaders and organizations do outperform their competitors. There are many reasons why. many, many reasons that we've heard today. So keep being real models, role models. If you are a leader in your organization, make sure you're investing, make sure you're having the conversations that make an impact. And also keep doing your best to influence others, whether it be having people join employee resource groups, whether it be actually looking at diverse suppliers or socially responsible suppliers in the supply chain, or even through to your consumer marketing preferences, making sure that we are resembling the communities in which we serve, all very important. So all is left for me to say thank you. It's Friday. Wonderful wherever you are around the world. Hope you have a fabulous Friday. Thank you so much to our panelists. You've just been an absolute joy. This has been a true power panel. I can't wait to catch up with all of you individually. If I haven't answered any of your questions, I'm so sorry. I've not been very good on timekeeping today, but please do message them to us, and we'll be doing another very special webinar next month. You can visit us at www.dalglobal.org, and we'll be sharing everything after the show today. So if you've enjoyed things and you've not managed to catch this live, please do feel free to pass on links to others, and you can rewatch on demand. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Bye.